right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining today to learn about PR tricks and tips. I'm Brooke Shapiro. I have Sprinkles Parents Marketing Consulting. I provide education and fractional CMO work for businesses. And I'm so grateful today to be here with Heather Willett from Willett PR. She is the expert in PR, and I'll let her introduce herself shortly. But before we start, I just want to share like why you might be here to ensure that we can all get the most out of today. We all want to learn about PR, what it is, how it works. We're going to learn the secrets of how to get picked up by the media and that ways that you can be featured in articles and the way it works. And we're going to learn also how when you should bring in PR, what's the best time? Do you bring in a person? Do you bring in a whole agency? Do you do it yourself? There's just a lot of different ways PR can work, and really want to educate everyone today about PR. So today we're going to understand the importance of PR, how it works with marketing and social and everything in between, as it's all become really integrated. When we're going to use PR, when you start your PR campaigns in your business, at what stage, when would you use PR, how do you get it started, and when to generate brand awareness and loyalty for your business. So if that sounds great, we're going to get started. Just really quick for those who don't know me, I know most of you here, and thank you for joining again. Um, my name is Brooke Shapiro. I have two complementary marketing business companies. One is Sprinkles Parents, where I provide education, activities, and resources to families in the Bay Area. I have 10,000 families in my network. And then my second is I'm a marketing consultant where I educate and guide. I work on incredible companies like Willett, who actually Kimberly, the founder, who's incredible, is here today. Anything in the parent tech space. I work with Place that helps online mom communities at scale. I've worked at Clorox, Johnson Babies, Toys R Us, Tot Squad, you name it, anything parent marketing. That's my jam. And most importantly, I have a 5-year-old boy who's autistic and a 3-year-old girl who is feisty as hell. But I'm so grateful for everyone today here. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Heather. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Brooke. Nice to see all of you and hopefully, get a chance to meet you. Hopefully we can connect on LinkedIn and otherwise. A little bit about me. So I've been in the industry for 20 years. And about 4 years ago, I started Willett PR after co-founding a different startup agency. I left there in the middle of the pandemic and decided to start Willett PR. We've been growing ever since. We work primarily with tech companies and so like B2B and consumer tech. And then we work with service companies too, as well as VCs. And typically we're working with VCs both in promoting the VC itself and also working with their portfolio companies. So we have deep experience working with startups at sort of every stage of the journey. And so I'm thrilled to be here today to talk to you about what that might look like, and just some of the tricks of the trade that I've picked up in my many years.
Yeah.
As I said, a little bit about what we do. I'm not going to dig into this too much. We can always send this to you if you're really interested. But I love that Brooke already touched on sort of an integrated approach. That is primarily what we strive for. I think this idea of traditional PR has really changed and shifted so much in the last 10 years that the most effective program is one that works very seamlessly with marketing and social media. So we're trying to just amplify those messages every chance we get, hitting, your stakeholders and your customers, and your clients from every angle with the messages that are going to resonate most with them. So that's really what we try to do is we take a very strategic approach, try to really embed ourselves into a client's team, internal teams to make sure that, we're kind of seamlessly touching on everything that we need to touch on and get those messages out there. So that is every program that we do is customized. I think that if you are considering working with an agency or even a contractor, you want to make sure that they are customizing the program to your needs, and your goals as a company.
Yeah. And can I just jump in? One thing I would say, since
Yeah,
as a
please do.
marketing person who's worked on lots of clients when I've worked alongside other PR agencies, it's really important to your point, and I just want to iterate this again to people that it's integrated because if PR is off on its own land, separated from everything else in marketing, that's where things fall apart. That's where you're not getting the most of it as it all sort of works together in your marketing plans, so that it's a cohesive approach. So that way you're not doing double work potentially. And you can use the same assets like great articles you get in PR, use that in a Facebook ad, right? Or like, or in your emails or something like that. So it all really is coexistent.
Yeah,
Cool.
perfect. Awesome. So I don't want to talk at the group here. So please feel free to jump in with questions at any point. I want this to be a dialogue. This should be a dialogue. Especially with, this many people. I think that, we can touch on the things that are most important to you. But I wanted to start by just kind of discussing what's so important about PR. I think there's a common misconception about what PR is. Some people think it's marketing, some people think it's advertising, other people think it's just social media. It's not really any of that. And it's also some of that sort of all rolled into one, right? Especially if you're doing an integrated approach. So, the easiest and most simplified way that I can put this is PR is really about word of mouth, right? It's spreading your messages in a more indirect way that feels less like you're selling to your customer base or your stakeholders. And it's really trying to generate that credibility, that visibility for your company in a way that feels less direct, a little bit less threatening to some degree, if that's the word you want to use. And it feels a little bit more like you're hearing from a friend or an expert that they're recommending your company or that they've had great experiences with your customer service or whatever it might be, right? And so that just helps to sort of build up both brand awareness, but also that credibility and that loyalty as well. So that's sort of what we aim to do with PR. And so there are a lot of benefits to PR if you are implementing it and you're implementing it in the right way, especially for startups. I mean, this is true of any company, but I think there are a lot of benefits for startups who maybe have never done this before, or they're just looking to launch their company, or they're looking to launch a new product. There is a lot of benefit with a PR program. The most important thing that I can say that isn't actually on this slide is it is important to have some consistency with PR. I think oftentimes, people think, oh, I'm just going to put out a press release, or I'm just going to do a little bit of PR around a launch, and then they drop off. You want to make sure that your company, product, services stays relevant, and so you want to continue with that momentum, right? You want to continue getting in front of the right people, sharing the right messages, and tweaking as you go, pivoting as you go, because sometimes there are going to be, different products that you want to focus on, or you have a change internally that needs to be communicated to your external stakeholders. So that's what a good PR agency or a contractor or even an internal hire will help you do.
And what
But
is
some
a
of,
press
go
release?
ahead.
Can you just like even take a step back? Like so many
Yeah.
times I work on accounts and people are like, we're gonna send it on the wire, we're gonna do a press release. Like, what does that mean? Is it worth it? Do you pay for press releases? How much should a press release be? Like, is there any like insights like that that you can help share with
Great
people?
questions. Yes, great questions, Brooke. Thank you so much. So yes, a press release is essentially a 1 to 2 page document that you kind of create, and you send that out publicly, right? That document, it has a headline, it has a dateline, and then you kind of it gets into a body, right? And that body is depending on what the announcement is, but that's what it is. It's an announcement that you're putting out. Um, and so that can be whether you have a new hire, or you are partnering with a new company, or you have a new product that you're launching, or a new service, right? Those are all good reasons to have a press release. I think, again, back 10, 20 years, press releases were so common and people put them out all the time. You're going to see less of that. They are less effective than they once were 10, 20 years ago. There is still a good reason to do it. For instance, we just had a client who launched sort of like new product features for their platform. Now, that's not necessarily going to be all that exciting for all of the media that we would want to reach, but they did get a little bit of pickup. And most importantly, it communicated what was happening with their, with their platform to their customers. So now their customers are looped in on like some of the changes that are taking place within the company and within the platform, and how they're, using these features to meet some of the goals that they set out at the beginning of the year, right? Um,
And
you have a
one thing, just
question.
no, I was just gonna say, so the one thing about I had a client, I'm not gonna say their name, and we constantly came out with new flavors, right? And we kept trying, they had a PR agency that they kept, putting on the wire a new flavor, putting on the wire a new flavor. And it was something where like we cared a lot that we have this new pumpkin Christmas pepper, you know what I mean, flavor. But for the wire, so many other brands have the same flavors, right? Like knowing, I think what's really important, if to your point, when you do a press release or when you are gonna put that information out there, is it important? Will media and people care? And is it something that is like press release worthy? Is this something you throw in your email worthy? Is this something that you send to the VCs, or is it consumer facing for PR, right? Because
Hmm.
there are, and if maybe we touch upon, and sorry, I know I'm going off slides, but more for people to learn is like there's consumer facing PR, right? And there are investor facing PR. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think, that's just it, right? If you're going to do PR, make sure that you have someone on your team, whether that's internally or externally, who knows how to pivot the message depending on the audience. Because that's always going to change, whether you're doing internal communications or external communications, that's going to change. So
Mm.
you really want somebody who knows how to be able to navigate all of that, for you. And to your point, Brooke, who can give you expert advice and guidance on, well, is this PR newsworthy? Is this, going to move the needle? I think so often people work with PR teams that just say yes. You want to make sure you work with a team who's willing to say no to you. One of the things in my experience of working with startups, the startup is their baby, right? This
Mhm.
is something they're very excited about. They've worked really hard for it. And of course we want to promote it. Of course we want to make sure that it gets the recognition it deserves. Not everything is going to be mind blowing or all that
Mhm.
interesting to the audience that they're targeting. So we have to get creative. We have to dig into what are your differentiators? What's the unique story here? And really figure out what that is, and then be able to say, like, I hear that you're really excited about this one feature. That's not going to be all that thrilling, but let's see if there's another way to tie this into a bigger story, or tie this into something else that you're doing or you have coming down the road, right? So that's all things that we try to think about and then try to navigate and strategize around.
Awesome. All right. Should we go to the next slide?
I was just gonna, if you can go back real quick.
Oh, sorry.
Um,
Yeah.
no, it's okay. I just wanted to touch on, because we didn't actually dig into all of this, but just some of the things that PR can do, is build that brand recognition. I kind of touched on that. Brand awareness, brand recognition. It does establish credibility because, like I said, you're not selling directly to people. You're kind of giving them the information, through sort of a third party that offers some of that credibility. And especially for startups who are looking to attract, investors, PR is a great way to do that. I will tell you from both my experience of working directly with VCs, but also companies who are looking to either get acquired or look for investors, look for funding. Those VCs and those investors actually they look for press coverage. They look for, byline articles that you've published. They look for, has the CEO been, had any speaking opportunities? Have they won any awards? They pay attention to that stuff because they're doing their due diligence on whether or not this is going to be a viable investment opportunity for them as well. PR supports growth, which we kind of talked about. It helps take a startup and help scale them, especially if you're looking for funding and you're able to attract that funding. And then, of course, helps manage reputation in case anything unfortunate did happen. Maybe you accidentally double charged clients or customers, and then you have to put out communication to say we're aware of this, we've resolved the issue. But that's when you want to have somebody on your team who can help you sort of figure out that communication. So yeah,
One thing with
thank you, Brooke.
also, of course, no, one thing back to credibility, and if you want to check the chat since I'm sharing my screen for everyone,
Yeah,
the thing about credibility. So I always say, like from my marketing lens, it's like if I'm brand, I don't know, Kleenex, I'm looking at a box. Like Kleenex, I can say I'm the best Kleenex box ever. I have the best, durability, I have the best smells, blah, blah, blah for Kleenex to say. And that's cool because it's my brand. Like you were saying, it's your baby. Of course you think your baby's cute. Of course you think your baby's smart. Of course you think your baby's the best thing since sliced bread, right? But
yeah,
when someone out like an article says, "Oh, like Kleenex is actually good," like I've got no skin in the game. That's why influencers sometimes, at points have blown up, right? Because it's a third party saying how great you are, not just you saying how great you are. And even just a real life
yeah.
example, I'm saying how great Heather is. Like, you trust me, you do now trust Heather. Like having that credibility with people, having credibility of like the people on your team, right? Like, well, that's why you announce when new great people on your team may come out in certain instances. If you know you just got a rock star developer or an exited founder joining your team, right? Like all these things of credibility, again, when an article says it, it's so much more powerful sometimes than when you say it because of course you're going to say it, right? Of course you're going to make your business look great. But it's when someone else can validate it, that's when it really can be more powerful. Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
absolutely.
Oh, this is my favorite
Terrific.
slide.
Um, so yeah, before we jump into like when to leverage PR, there really isn't a bad time necessarily to ever start doing PR. The only thing I would like preface this with is make sure that you've done a few things before you're going to start doing PR. Make sure that you have a proper website and you have figured that out. You've gotten your colors figured out, your branding figured out. You have a very clear message. You know who your target customer is. Those are all really important things. I mean, that those are important things to do when you're starting marketing. That's very important to have established before you start going out with any sort of PR, because PR is all about the messaging. If you're going to go out with your story, make sure that you are consistent with that story. You're telling, the message that you want to tell. You have figured out your differentiators. What's really different here with our product or our service, versus maybe a direct competitor. So doing a little bit of that due diligence, figuring out some of that stuff before you engage in PR is really important. That being said, I think there really isn't, like I said, a terrible time to do PR. For startups, if you're going to put out a new product, or you're going to launch a new service, start thinking about doing PR prior to that launch. You want to make sure that you're sort of building up some of that momentum so that when you do launch, you have people who are interested, who've been waiting for that launch and then want to see what comes of it, right? So that's always really great. It starts to build that brand awareness before you even really like launched the product or service, which is really, really terrific. And then of course, when it launches, you want to make sure that you put that out there. And I will state this again. I know it's here in the slide. Start doing this before you actually launch.
Yeah.
I can't begin to tell you how many startups have reached out to us and they're like, we want to put out a press release for a new product next week. And we want to like make sure that we have, a lot of press like when we launch. And I'm like, first of all, it's going to take some time to write a press release because I need to understand what the product or service is. Second of all, you're about to launch this in a week and you've done very little in terms of PR to actually build that momentum before the launch itself. So I always say start thinking about this at least a month in advance. If you're going to do pre-launch kind of outreach, then you're looking at 3 to 6 months. But start thinking about that as part of the strategy and not just an afterthought. You're going to see a lot more momentum and traction when you start to like do that in the earlier stages, versus when you've already done it and then you're trying to like backtrack and get coverage for something that has happened maybe a month ago. So
Yeah. And one thing could I just add
Yeah,
to
go
that
ahead.
really quick? Sorry, before we get into post launch,
Of
is like
course.
when you're
Yeah.
thinking about your launch, for example, like I've worked a lot of times for holiday stuff, like anyone who wants holiday gift guides and holiday, press and holiday this and that, right? Super cluttered time, especially when it's going to be with the elections this year, right? You can't say you want to do it in November 1st for November 25th, right? A lot of these calendars for press and articles and stuff are being planned way well in advance. And correct me if I'm wrong, Heather, like in July as and June, I've heard like, hey, we're starting to get our like back to school going, and you're like, wait, but that's not till
Hmm.
September. Or like even holiday in August, I was doing for one of my brands, the PR agency, I was working with them to figure out what we're gonna do for holiday. So you really need to think almost like 6 months in advance, just like really thinking ahead of what you're wanting to catch and do so that you can get ahead of it. And because PR is like getting into the articles, getting the right time with the editors, getting into all these things, it's not as fast as you think. It just takes a little
Yeah.
bit of time that you need to like talk to someone, be like, hey, we're going to do this article thing about this. Are you writing about this? Like, here's what we're thinking. Like, it just takes a bit more time sometimes. Some things fall in your lap, and that's magical when articles and opportunities fall in your lap. I love when that happens. But I think there's also an element of like, thinking ahead of where you want to be for your PR and what you want your message to be for your PR and what you stand for in PR, that needs to happen ahead of time. And that's where a lot of times, like with my role, I'm trying to get everything together to give someone in PR, if that makes sense. So that way you have like what the brands are standing for. What do they want to align around? How do they want to show up? Are they going to be in like funny
Yeah.
articles? Are they going to be in very technical articles? Are they going to be, like where, how we're going to want to position it? Like I said, the upfront work, because when it comes to you, you're going to be obviously massaging it and tweaking it and making it better from, how I hand you, but you need like that foundation and the time ahead of time and everything to have it so it can like all align perfectly for your launch
Hmm.
time and everything like that too.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really great point. So, just looking at Mother's Day, that outreach started in like January, February. So again, really important to start thinking ahead if you're aiming for, certain things and certain that have a timeline to them. Very important. I'd also like to say, just to your point, Brooke, like, working with someone like Brooke to figure out like the branding and the messaging and that's terrific. Do that up front. It's even better if you can pull in like a Brooke and a Heather, right, together, because we can help each other figure out what's really going to move the needle, both in terms of the customer slash client and the media itself. So, I mean, that's when you really have a powerhouse duo.
Yeah. And there's two medias just for everyone who understands. There's like obviously the PR media, right? And then you guys have heard like there's the social media and the advertising media.
Hmm.
The word media gets used a lot throughout this like
Yeah.
funnel of communications. So just making sure, we have all the medias aligned. I always say before
Well, and
launch,
this
yeah.
is true. Yeah, this slide, it's true of social media as well. So we do, we focus on PR, we focus on social media, we do a little bit of marketing when we work with people like Brooke, and other agencies, but we try to focus on like the social and PR aspect of things and kind of combining all of that, and then integrating that with marketing teams. So this is true of social as well. If you're going to do a product launch, let's make sure you're starting to put out social posts that, you have some prototypes that that you're putting out there, that you have these unboxing videos, right? Anything like that. Let's make sure that you're collecting some of that content. You have a content calendar, when things are going to go out, and it's timing and syncing up with what you're doing on the marketing and PR front as well, so that that timing is just perfect, across all channels. So that is something to consider.
Yes.
Just real quick, we talked about pre-launch and then actual launch. As I mentioned before, it's really important to keep momentum going. Um, it depends on what your goal with the company is. You may decide that, ultimately you want to get acquired, or you want to sell the business, um, or you want to scale it and you want to grow it and you want to put out more products, whatever that may be, you're going to need consistency. There's going to need momentum and consistency as you continue, and just continuous engagement. So post launch, you'll keep up with that. If you're looking to scale, you'll make sure that your PR team or your internal teams are putting out content that is relevant at all times of the year to every one of your stakeholders. And I say stakeholders, and when I say stakeholders, I mean clients, customers, internal teams, whoever that is. And then, of course, anytime you have a major announcement, like we discussed with the press releases, anytime you have a major announcement, like make sure that you're doing PR around those too. So a good PR team will kind of give you some guidance on what that looks like. But I can't stress enough the consistency and just continuing to do something on the PR front, because that's going to be really important to
Can
continue
I
getting that message out there.
can I push on that a little bit just because I know some of the
Of
folks here?
course.
I think major achievements sometimes don't feel major. You're like, oh yeah, of course, like XYZ happened today, but they are major achievements for you to celebrate. For example, like if you have a really cool partnership, like I don't know, you're
Yep.
partnering, like I worked on Hidden Valley Ranch, right? And we partnered with Van Leeuwen ice cream, right? And so like that's a cool thing that you want to announce. Like that's something like unexpected and cool. That was something that like we had worked on for years and took like 50, it took so long to get there. That's a cool thing that you want to announce, like unexpected partnerships. If you have, some famous person who happened to DM you that they loved your product, like not saying like that's like a big one, but like there are major achievements that you've worked really hard toward, like getting into a certain point of your business, like, hitting X many users. I don't know, like you can talk to it more about the details of it, but there are so many achievements that I think as startups and founders and as people, like every day is just our reality, but are really big
Hmm.
achievements. Like if you're like, the first, I don't know, like, autistic start founder who like was able to like graduate, like so many things like that that people don't realize are big and are huge accomplishments in the world. And frankly, a little bit tooting my horn, like you're inspiring other people sometimes with PR, which can be really cool, right? Like you're sharing those founder stories that of their accomplishments, and it someone else may read it like an investor and be like, oh my gosh, like that is incredible, right? Like I want to be around that person who overcame or did so much. So
Yeah,
I don't know, Heather, if you
absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's just it. Like sometimes it feels really small, but you're talking about partnerships. I mean, the thing is, and this is why we say an integrated approach is the most successful one. It's the most effective because if you have a really interesting partnership, might not even be that big of a company, but they have an audience too. And so when you're like putting out, content around this partnership, you can also encourage them to put out content to their customer base, to their audience, about the partnership as well. And now you've just like doubled, tripled, whatever, right? Your reach. So I think, leaning into some of those partnerships is really important. And that's where you start to think about, okay, well, how can we leverage social? How can we leverage marketing? How can we leverage our partnerships and, any awards that we've won or speaking opportunities that we have? Because oftentimes, even with, if you did a speaking opportunity, whatever trade show or conference that's at, they're going to promote you as well. They're going to say, oh, XYZ is speaking on this topic, or they're going to be part of this panel discussion. So it just continues to build momentum and get your name, get your company's name and your brand out there. And that just amplifies what you're doing.
yeah.
Awesome.
Anything else on the slide?
I don't think so. I think we can move on.
Okay, cool.
Does anybody have any
Awesome.
questions?
Feel
No?
free to go off
Okay.
mute or in the chat.
Yeah, go like jump in at any point. Like I said, I want this to be a dialogue. I want this to be really useful and valuable to you. Um, and so I don't know where everybody is in their stage of this journey. So feel free to ask questions that are a little bit more maybe specific to you. And I'll do my best to answer, give you some guidance. So
Yeah.
again, we've been talking a lot about startups and sort of like early stage startups. Maybe you've done some funding, maybe you haven't. But what are the first things to sort of think about when you're looking to do PR? So I kind of touched on making sure that you have your branding down, you have a website, you have messaging. So some of the things that, we would be either working with Brooke on or Brooke has already done, and then, we come in and we have that already to work with is really important. We're getting a question. Hold on. Let's see. Hi, Kim. All right. She says, what is the best way to pay an agency for PR? Per placement, flat rate? Is it retainer and then monthly, quarterly? That's a great question. Um, we typically work within like a retainer. We found that to be the most successful because then that gives us more room to kind of take things on as they come because every month is going to be a little bit different. And it's also just a little bit easier to budget for versus, if you're doing hourly and then you have some months that are just a lot heavier because you have, multiple product launches or you have a lot of outreach because you're trying to lead into the holidays or something. So it's a little bit more effective, I think, and just, a little bit easier to budget for if you do retainer. But you can find agencies or even freelancers, contractors that will come in and just do um, an hourly rate, or you probably won't find anyone worth their salt who's just going to do per placement because it actually takes a lot of work to get those placements, especially if we're just starting. So I would say either a monthly retainer, which is what we do, or you can look at something that is a little bit longer. But of course, you want to look at their contracts as well. Some contracts are 6 months, some are years, an annual contract. So, but those are all great questions and things that you'd want to figure out prior probably to having discussions with an agency or a contractor.
Is there like I
Maya.
know that
Oh,
there are I know before you get to Maya, sorry, really quick on this point.
yeah.
Maya, I see you raising your hand. Thank you. 1 second just on this. There are things like Linkbee and Presshook, if you're familiar with those. I don't know, Heather, if you have thoughts on those. I don't know if Michelle joined.
Michelle
But
did join, so I don't.
oh.
I think she's more equipped to discuss press hook than maybe I am.
You see, Michelle. Michelle, I don't know if you want to go off mute and like explain how in those situations. Sorry, I can't see you.
Yeah, no, sorry. I'm just all ingesting all this information. It's good stuff for me to have. But yeah, we are a site that helps agencies and brands connect with media. So as media are writing their stories and looking for new products and content, they can find products, they can reach out to the PR person or brand directly, and then brands can also reach out to them directly on the platform. But we really only the only thing is we really only work with consumer goods and products, not as much in tech and B2B. So, but yeah, that's most of
Yeah.
it.
So there are just like resources too. I guess I was gonna say that like PR agencies use and like other when you're, really small, when you are able to grow a bit more. Like I think there's just so many different angles of when it's the right time and when what your budget looks like for PR and things like that too. Sorry, Maya, back to you.
Yeah, great question. Thank you. So what about the case that you mentioned where you've missed the initial window or the pre-planning and now you want to jump into the already moving river? And also, it seems to me like once you start, you can't stop. Like it is a commitment forever. So I would like to hear your thoughts about both of those. Thanks.
Yeah. So, great questions. As I said, there's never a terrible time to start PR. So there is some more advantage to starting earlier, but if you've missed that window, it doesn't mean you can't start. You can start from where you are, right? And working with like the right person or the right team is going to help navigate how to get you into those conversations, insert you into the conversations that are happening around your company or a product. Make sure that you're getting in front of the right people, whether that's sending samples or including you in roundups, anything like that.
Mhm.
That can happen even if it's after at post launch, right? So that's why if you go back to the last slide, Brooke, that's why there's on there, post launch, like it's still an opportunity. So don't think you can't start just because you're maybe like post launch, or you're maybe just starting to scale. You can start at any point. It's just the strategy is going to be a little bit different at each of these stages, right? And that's where we come in, because we know how to sort of move the needle at each one of these stages. And then in terms of, it feels like you have to do it forever. I mean, this is my career. I've been doing this a long time, so I always think that you should be doing PR. But that doesn't mean that you have to go as heavy every single month or every year. You can figure out what feels good. And like I said, we customize and we tailor every program that we do, because some years are going to look a little bit different, or some months are going to look a little bit different, or quarters, right? So you want to make sure that you're fitting into the budget, and two, what are the goals and needs of the company right now. Sometimes we come on and we're like, okay, well, the budget's a little bit smaller, but this is where we can start. And the point is then to like get you to a point where you're scaling and you're growing, and then we can also scale the PR program. So you want something that's going to be a little bit fluid and work with you, not against you, right? Where you feel like you have to do it a specific way, because that's just not life in any sense of the word, right? So yes, that would be my answer.
But
Hopefully
so
that was
actually,
helpful.
yeah. And Maya, do you mind if I try and tap into your brain 1 second? Um, so
Yeah.
Maya has, okay, cool. So Maya has a really incredible app. Would you say, like, does PR drive conversions or downloads to apps and things like that? Like, is that like a fair KPI to expect from PR? Or like, how are things that, in that situation when you have a product like an app or something very specific in that area, like how does that kind of work?
Yeah, so that's a great question too. So KPIs, with PR, it's a little bit more, it is more challenging, I guess, to measure that direct ROI, because it isn't like marketing where you are specifically reaching out to the customer and then being able to, evaluate that conversion rate, right? This is more indirect. That's why it's really effective, is because it's indirect, but it also makes it a little bit harder to track. That being said, technology is amazing, and we are constantly finding new ways to sort of measure the effectiveness of PR. So some of the ways, and there is a slide at the end here that kind of talks about this, but
This guy?
the potential ROI, yeah.
Oh,
So
yeah,
you'll
sorry.
see that 10%, yeah. So one of the ways that we have evaluated the effectiveness of a PR program is what we call share of voice. So that looks at your direct competitors, which you would then identify. And we would measure, like, okay, what percentage of the market do you hold based on, company mentions, press, coverage, and compare that to what percentage your competitors are holding. And the goal then is to then continuously increase that share of voice so that you're getting more of that market share. So that's one way. We've also looked at, we measure how many, press hits or pieces of coverage are you getting per month. We can also look at website traffic. So if you have a big announcement, a product launch, right, we can then push that launch and then take a look at, if you have Google Analytics, did that increase website traffic? Was there, one client that I worked with years ago, they had a product, we got them on the Today Show, and in 2 hours their sales doubled. And and we knew it was because they were on the Today Show, right? And all these people saw that. So sometimes it's a little bit more direct, but those are all things that we can look at. We can look at ad equivalency as well, because advertising spend can be very expensive. But if you have, 6 pieces of coverage in a month, you can get 2 million, in which would be like ad dollars, equivalent to ad dollars. So we can look at that. So there are lots of different things we can do to kind of figure out how effective a PR program is.
That's awesome. That's always the hardest part, I feel like, when we're looking at the end of a campaign and trying to see what to do next, right? As you like look at like what just happened the past month, or if it was like a product launch over 3 months and you're reflecting, it's like
Mm-hmm.
so much of our brains are like, ROI or return on ad spend, focus, 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 but there's so much more to look at, like that you can't track, right? Or like the mentions or the positive sentiment or the share of voice, like all those other things
Yep.
that are also really important, or getting in front of the right people in the right rooms, right? That PR can also do at the right point.
I have one piece for
Yeah.
ROI that I think is helpful to share too.
Yes, please.
We
Lisa.
use PR for our company solely because the press coverage we get, we use in our ad campaigns, and they get us like a 4x ROAS over any other campaign we use. So like we have to do PR and that gets us sales. So, and I know like CPG and apps, whatever it is too, but when you use that PR in your ad campaigns, that press coverage, you just get that instant credibility. And I promise I've seen like across the board, just other examples, but the ROI and like across and all the metrics in advertising are way higher when you use a piece of press coverage in your ad campaign.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I would say it's not just ad campaigns either. It's social media campaigns, marketing campaigns, when you're able to show, that some of these bigger Parade magazine or Forbes magazine, right, has picked you up and has covered your product or service. There's more credibility there, and I think that just amplifies those campaigns across the board when you're able to kind of share that and maximize leverage that piece of content or that placement in multiple different ways.
Yeah. And does it bring traffic to your site too, Heather? Like when you're in an article or backlinks, like, is there anything like that you want to
Yep.
talk about?
So especially if you have SEO on your site, that's always great. That's another thing that if you're going to build a website, consider doing SEO from the very beginning.
Hmm.
SEO takes time for you to
Hmm.
see the benefit of it, but it definitely works. So if you do that from the very beginning, you will eventually start to see the power of SEO. But yes, I mean, we always try to get links in everything that we do, and every piece of coverage that we get, we always try to get a link so that it links back to the company website or the product page. And we do that on purpose because that does help to drive website traffic. So, like I said, as long as the client, has some sort of analytics on their website that can kind of track this stuff, then we can look at, well, you've started this PR program. What's been the increase in website traffic? You got into Forbes. Did the website traffic increase that day that, that story launched? So we can kind of pay attention to that stuff and see the trends that are taking place. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you can see in Google Analytics. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure in Google Analytics you can see what has come from certain articles. When I've
Mm-hmm.
done reporting in the past, so that way you can like again, one of my clients, we had an article in, I want to say like Meredith Recipes or something like that for a food product, and like years later they were still getting, the good traffic from that PR article that was in Meredith. And so I think that that's also just another thing, benefit, that like you may not be able to tie exact like sale conversion today, because it's once removed. But so we have 10
Yeah.
minutes left. I want to
Yeah.
give us some
We
time
had
for
a
people.
question from Jana,
Oh,
real quick.
sorry.
Jana had a
Yes.
question. That's okay. I just want to make sure I answer all the questions. And she had a
Yes.
good one. So she says, do PR professionals have some connections with the press that are advantageous over using the DIY route? If you are trying to DIY because of budget constraints, what are the most important things to focus on? So I would say, traditional PR has always focused on building relationships. That's still true. But because the media landscape has changed so much and a lot of people have become freelancers, especially after 2020, people are moving around a lot. That being said, that doesn't mean that you aren't still building relationships with people who are in new beats or in new roles, that you're not continuing to follow somebody who you used to do, business with, PR with, that you're not following them to the next, company or outlet that they're at, right? So you definitely want to make sure that you're still building those relationships. And I think that is important. That's something that PR professionals have done really well. It also takes a lot of research and time that goes into it. You
Mhm.
need to make sure that you're researching, each journalist, each editor, What are they covering? When was the last time they wrote something? What do they lean toward? Do they have products or services that they really love? Things that they didn't like in the past? Have they covered, something similar? Have they covered a competitor, right? So there are lots of things to look into and dig into. And so it is about kind of doing a lot of research beforehand, getting very specific with your target list, who you're going to go and interact with in terms of media. And then it's about building those relationships, and those take time, especially these days. People have less time available. I would say they're even probably a little bit, everyone's stretched really thin, and probably even a little bit more. There's just so much noise, right? And so I think it's harder to break out when you're trying to build those relationships. And I think the key is that oftentimes we've had startup founders, entrepreneurs do their own sort of outreach and haven't had much success for the very reason that, again, it's their baby. So the way they talk about it versus somebody who is slightly removed, who knows how to talk to the media, it's different, right? So they don't want to be sold to either, just as much as as the consumer. So they don't want to be sold to. They want to make sure that what they write about, what they're interested in, who their readers are, who their audience is, and that your message is tailored to that and less about, hey, let me tell you about my product and why it's so amazing. So it's a fine line of like figuring out how to communicate with them and how to continue to build those relationships with them. You can do it. It just takes time.
Yeah. Just
Hope
to
that was
build on.
helpful.
Yeah. Jenna, I don't know if you're welcome to go off mute.
Yeah. Yes, I can.
Have you like tried doing it DIY yourself, and like what have you tried to do, or like because like one way DIY could be like podcasts. I don't know if you consider Heather podcasts and speaking on podcasts as thought leadership as PR.
Yes, I do.
And
yes, I do. And we do a lot of podcast outreach. Yep.
Right. And so I did it for a client, a silicone pump client, and I spent, I don't know, 3 or 4 hours trying to figure out every breastfeeding podcast, every pumping podcast, who you contact on the podcast. How am I gonna like niche and get them to talk to me to get her on the podcast? And it just takes time versus, she finally brought on a PR agency, and they're like, oh yeah, like I know everyone in these pregnancy podcasts because I do this day in and day out with 5 other pregnancy, clients, right? So there is that element of putting in the grunt work, and just like sometimes it just is so much easier if someone else has done it before, from the DIY route. But podcasts are always like another way, from a PR standpoint, that are effective too. That could be an entire other seminar, which maybe I'll do another day because that's a beast
exactly.
in itself. Yeah. Awesome.
Awesome. Do we have any other questions? I know there was a slide sort of on first, on like the initial steps to take for effective PR. I will send this deck to anyone who's interested after this call, just so that you have it and you can kind of read through it in your own leisure. And then of course, feel free to always reach out to me with any questions, either via email or on LinkedIn, whatever works best for you. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Actually, I'm going to stop sharing my screen a second. I'll be sharing this deck too, just the follow-up email is automatic. So tech savvy.
Perfect. So never
And
mind.
so we'll have the deck. You guys can watch the video. You'll have Heather's contact. So first off, thank you, Heather, so much for your time and sharing your knowledge today. Like super grateful. It's so fun to speak with an expert in this space. We'll have the video, we'll have the deck. You have our contact information if anyone needs help. If you have any specific questions, feel free to come off mute and share. We all want to support your businesses in any way and help you thrive, cheerlead you, grow, anything like that. So feel free to just, reach out in any way. Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, I'll give you guys 5 minutes back in your day. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful day, wonderful weekend.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you
Nice
again,
to meet
Heather.
everybody.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.